welcome.
Yeah.
Happy to welcome Randy Dorn, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, meeting with the Columbian Editorial Board. Also would like to welcome Nate Olson, Communications Manager for the Office of Public Instruction. Thanks for coming in. Just have an informal session, get caught up. And just so you know, we are videotaping this for use on our website.
Yeah.
So
That's no problem.
just to be aware. So we'll just open it up. In your mind, what is the biggest issue facing public instruction in Washington right now?
Well, first,
a broad
I
question.
want you to know the reason I'm here. If nothing comes out of it other than we just have a conversation, that's really what we've been trying
Sure.
to do. It wasn't like we're looking for an op-ed or an opinion. All we're trying to do is try to make sure everybody understands what McCleary really is, what the court has really said, and what the obligation is by the legislature and the governor, or you could say the state of Washington, because the contempt order was not just to the legislature. The contempt order was to the governor, to me, and to the citizens of the state of Washington, because they're not fully doing it. So what I'd like you to do is open up your packet and go to the left side and the second page. It says what, this one right here. And I know this is going to be a little review for you folks because you've written about it and you know about it. But I kind of want to review because of what's kind of going on in Olympia today and what I think might happen in the future. I'll first talk what I believe are facts, and then when I get into my opinion, I'll definitely say it's my opinion, okay? And if it's my opinion, it's definitely not factual, okay? So
We're accused of that all the time.
yeah, okay. So the first thing, what is McCleary? There's only really three words that matter, and that is paramount duty, okay? So, I go to fifth grade classrooms and I ask kids, what does paramount mean? Number one, the most important, the most significant, whatever they say, it's the thing you got to do, okay? And on this one, I've heard kind of the stuff being said that, we got to fund education first. So if you go along with that theory, then really we don't have to raise any money because you'll fund education first. So education, everything in McCleary is going to be funded. The problem is, how are we going to do corrections? How are we going to do DSHS? How are we going to do the state patrol? How are we going to do the Department of Ecology? All these other things that we have come to know, that come to be. So really, the theory is education should be paid for, just that these other things. So if we have to raise new revenue. It's really not for education. It's for all these other things that we want to do. The other thing is the word ample. And again, I go to a fifth grade classroom. I want to make this simple. Which do you want? Do you want an average allowance, or do you want an ample allowance? Well, I've yet to find any fifth grader that will take the average allowance. They want ample because they know that ample is more than average. Okay? And that's what our court says about our system. The facts are we're 42nd in the nation in per pupil funding. And so that may be our example of we got to get to be 24th to be considered ample. Could be a decision. And then the last one is the one where I probably have the biggest concern over of where our state seems to be headed right now, and that is the word uniform. Now, I understand uniform doesn't mean exactly. I get that. I go to public schools that they have a uniform dress code. Kids can have long sleeve shirts, they can have short sleeve shirts, they can be white, they can be blue, they can have khaki shorts, they can have long pants, they can have black or they can have beige, so there's a variance, but it's a pretty tight variance. It doesn't mean exactly, but it means that it has to be pretty close. Where the court has ruled is that one, we seem to be growing apart as far as our local levies. There's the have districts, or the really have districts, which are the grandfather districts. They're running 36% levies. Then there's the top of the regular levies, which is 28. But there's a lot of communities that can only run a 15, 14% levy. The other concern is that of the levies, 50% of the levies are paying for salaries. And the legislature has looked at the overall expenditures of levies, and they've come to the conclusion that 85 to 90% of levies are being spent on basic education, which is a responsibility of the state. I had a difficult time getting superintendents to understand that the court has ruled that you can no longer use local levies for state responsibility. So finally what my example was, which I have to take my hat off to the legislature, this year they fully funded transportation, which was one of the 4 buckets in 2261 and 2776. That's halfway down the page, full funding of student transportation. The legislature is actually fully funding basic education, transportation. I want to be clear, that's to and from school. That's not athletics, that's not field trips, but they funded that. But if you go back 4 years ago and you ask local superintendents, are you using any of your local levies to fund to and from school? And about 80% of our districts were using their levies to fund to and from school. So you guys do understand the court said you can't do that anymore, that you're unconstitutionally spending your local levy dollars. And they kind of, well, no, I mean, how else would we do it? I'll go, well, I'm just trying to point out that this is what's coming down the road. So the court said that compensation is a state responsibility. Not extra days for teaching, for doing professional development. The state doesn't pay for any of that. But that 180 days that you teach, the state is responsible for doing that, okay? So how you pay teachers in there is a state responsibility. So we have some districts paying 60 to 70 days of time responsibility incentive package, okay? So we have districts paying close to $20,000 extra for teaching the 180 days. Well, that's compensation for your 180 days teaching, and you're using your local levy dollars. Now, it's making an unfair playing field because some districts can pay that and they attract the very best, the very brightest teachers. Other districts can't, and they get young teachers, they become veterans, and they move to another district. That's where it becomes not a uniform system. It's out of balance. And it could be said that if you use in a general overview of the state, the districts that can't afford the larger levies usually have a disproportionality of poor kids and minority kids. Okay? Not always, okay? But there's that factor. And so that doesn't just become a state problem, that becomes a civil rights issue.
Well, so, and let me stop you there for a second. Let's look at that. So then aren't we catering to the lowest common denominator? If we say some districts cannot afford to pay that extra through levies, while other more affluent districts, they can pass a levy, they can afford to pay more. Aren't we bringing the top districts down to the lower level?
No.
Why not?
Okay? Because if you use this as your bar, okay, going forward with some, and this is what the court said you had to do, you can't make districts more dependent on their local levies, and we'll get to that in a moment. So you should have to put sideboards right now of where those high-end districts are. I'm not suggesting that they're going to get a lot more money, because I believe those kids are getting a 21st century education. But what I'm worried about is these kids aren't getting the 21st century, so we have to bring those districts up to that bar. I'm not saying lower the bar. I'm saying we've got to bring those up. I think a fair salary for teachers is 180 days, and they're making $80,000 to $85,000. I think that's a fair wage.
What is the statewide average now for public school teachers?
I think it's for public school. I think it's around 56, 57. But
And that's
that
just
average
salary?
is that's just
For
salary.
180 days.
For 180 days, yeah. You know, our low end salary is like 36,000. You know, and that's just off the state salary schedule. But then some districts have the try that gets added to it, and the top end is about $67,000. But then they get the try added onto it. But
So with the try added onto it, it's 67 plus what?
what did you say?
So what's the high end on teacher?
Is between 60 and 70
60 to 70.
days. So the high end's about 20,000.
Oh,
So
For the try.
50,
Yeah,
for the try.
your try package.
okay.
Yeah, your number of days, the high end is around 20, but it varies all the way from 5 extra days to 14 to 20 to 40. But so your question is, so we have these levies over here
Right.
that the court has ruled that you can't use them for what? Basic education.
Right.
Salaries you're responsible for. So the Senate and the House has looked at it, about 85 to 90% is used for basic education. If you just look at salaries, 50% of our levies is used for salaries. So you have this money sitting on the table that's levy dollars. So if you lower the levies but capture the money and put it on the state side, you could try to keep it even.
So as the legislature's haggling right now, and they're going to pass a budget, it's going to include a lot of money for education. Then what is the process for getting this levy equalization and for local districts reducing their levies?
There is none.
So,
There's no bill.
right.
They've had a bill introduced and that's it. And this issue has been sitting on the table for 5 years.
Right. So then your local district, they wait until the levy expires?
Okay.
Or,
If we look at the 3 budgets that are on the table today, there is not a solution to lowering the levy yet. There's no mechanism yet. And
what will be the eventual mechanism for that?
the eventual mechanism would be that you would lower, like they did in 78 and 77, that you lower the levels to a certain amount. Let's say 15%. In 78 it was 10. So you lower it to 15, and then you get a property tax statement for your house. Some goes to the county, some goes to the local district, some goes to the state. You would shift that, what went to the district, to the state side, and then the state would pay the district. You would try to do no harm, okay? To do that, to put that mechanism in place, you would need more revenue to bring districts up, okay? But you would use a piece of it, about $1.5 billion could move over to help do that,
Right.
okay? But here's my problem going forward. That's one problem, that there's not even a slowdown of using local levies to slow it down. And the court said, you need to quit using local levies for salaries and basic ed. And in fact, if any one of the 3 budgets passed, it would increase the reliance on special levies. And my example would be this sheet. This is like, I'm trying to get the simplest example. So when the state funds teachers on this teacher allocation, we fund where they are on the salary grid. You have 5 years of experience, you have a master's degree, we pay X, okay? We don't pay for the try, but we pay X for everything that's generated by our allocation. But when it comes for administrators, the state is always lagged behind on what they call FTE, full-time equivalent FTE. So here, I just ran the numbers of what the state pays for an administrator. And you can see they all are a little bit different, but you can see there's a pretty dramatic difference between what the state pays and what the district actually pays. There's always been that lag. But the state pays for actual cost of an actual teacher. So you see the differential. So just going forward, the state, when they give a COLA, they're going to give the COLA, let's just use Battleground as an example, that first number. And let's say over a 2-year period, the COLA is just, for example's sake, I'm not saying that's what it's going to be. But let's say over the 2-year period, they pass the first 2 years of the biennium, it's going to be 2.5, and the next year it's going to be 2.5. Let's just say total, it's 5%. Okay, so 5% of 60,000 is going to be $3,000. Well, the district, the contract for that person is actually 101,000. So they get a COLA of 5,000 instead of $3,000. It's going to be $5,000. So they made it more expensive. Moving forward, that COLA, more money has to come out of the levy to cover that salary. Okay? It's even worse when you talk about classified, because we've not changed the classified allocation since we did the Basic Ed Act. And we've added a lot of job descriptions and a lot of things districts have to do today that they didn't have to do when we did the formula. That's why when the Quality Education Council adopted the prototypical school model, and it's actually in the court case that that's what you have to move to as the legislature, as the actual people in the district that districts believe for a 21st century education system, you have to fund, and we raised the rates of things like, so I'll give you the examples. 20 years ago, we didn't have many security people on our campuses. We do today. 20 years ago, we didn't have many IT people on the campus. We do today. We didn't have food service workers working at breakfast time on the campus. Special education buses, because we have more severe handicapped kids, more kids that have disabilities that are more severe that require to ride on a special education bus with a paraeducator on the bus. So all those things were added, but we didn't add how many more FTE we needed. So those have been picked up by who? Levies. And the other example is, and I'm going to put a little blame on the federal government, and I'll give you the example that comes up all the time. So the feds, when they passed IDEA, which is the Individuals Disability Education Act, that the feds were always supposed to pay 40% of the cost, okay? And in 2008, we got up to 36%. It was the highest we've ever been. We're now at 20% again because of sequestration, and we're kind of sliding back to try to balance the budget. They cut back. So how do you make up special education? The state gives their allocation at a certain ratio of kids per population. So local levy picks it up. But that's either got to be a state or a federal responsibility. And the U.S. Senator from Colorado is a former superintendent of Denver Public Schools. And we have this Elementary Secondary Education Act trying to be reauthorized right now in the Senate. And one of the pushes that Senator Murray has is to fund more of early learning from the federal side. Her colleague that's a Democrat out of Colorado said, hey, before we add something to the Elementary Secondary Education Act, how about we fund special education first at the level we said we would before we add anything else? He makes a good point. And I want to remind, now I'm going to go back to this equity issue and levies. So the Elementary Secondary Education Act, I asked this question to educators. They don't know who did it, so if you don't know, I'm not trying to trick you. So what president signed the Elementary Secondary Education Act, and why was it brought about? Yeah, most educators don't know, so don't feel, nobody knows, okay? I'm a history buff, huh?
Johnson.
You're right. Good job. I'm going to send you a golden attitude pin. I've given them all away today.
I want a gold star.
No, you get a golden attitude pin. I want you to know. So Johnson passed it right during the upheaval of Selma and all that. So why did they pass the Elementary Secondary Education Act? They couldn't tell states how to run their education system. And how they were running their education system is certain school districts in states got X amount of money per kid, and other districts got other amounts of money. One being higher, one being lower. Well, guess one was the white school, guess one was the black school. So the Fed said, okay, we're not doing it on race, we're going to do it on poverty. So where the poor kids are that are performing poorly, if you get free and reduced lunch, we're going to give you extra money called Title I to hire more teachers, to give you more time to do math and reading. And that's where the Elementary Secondary Education Act came from. That's what it's supposed to be all about, is helping poor kids and close the gap. So
Now,
here we,
let me back up just
Yep.
a sec. So in talking about balancing all these funds and the obvious budget problems or
Mhm.
crunch, what should the state, what should the legislature do about I-1351?
okay. So first of
Is
all,
that even viable right
Yeah,
now,
right.
given all the other
Okay,
problems?
okay. So first of all, I will get to my plan and how we proposed it and stuff. So on 1351, a lot of the staffing has been recommended in the court case under the prototypical school model. K3 allocation is there. The legislature agrees they got to start lowering the class size of K3. And staffing of secretaries, staffing of
Right.
custodian, it's all in the
Well,
prototypical model.
And
So
wasn't
13
all of that spelled out in the actual measure that was passed?
it was spelled out. I believe in the court case, there's disagreement in the legislature. They don't think that they're on the hook for 4th through 12th grade lowering class size. I believe they are, but that's my belief. And all the staffing that goes with it, increased counselors, administrators, all that I believe is in there. 1351, we kind of do the prototypical school model and say you have to pay for that. On 1351, we said if it goes forward, you're going to have to adjust it. You just can't pay for it, especially by 2018. That's not what the court never said. You have to do this by 2018. That was 2776. The legislature actually passed a law and said we can do this by 2018. Okay? So we propose that you make that rolling into the class size is not done by 2018. We propose it's done by 2021. You're going to have more time to grow into it. And I guess if you're not talking about new revenue, which I believe you have to do, you could probably cross your fingers and hope our economy grows continually for the next 6 years and never hits a downturn. But every 10 years we usually do, so about 2018 we'd be close. So we propose that. We also propose that we bump up 4, 5, and 6th grade, we bring it down to 24-1, and in 7th through 12th grade, we bump it up to 27-1. So it gives it a little bit of room. We also have new research that I think we're going to give to the legislature and have to take a look at, because you're going to have to revisit what is basic ed. It's not going to be, this is basic ed and we'll never go back and visit it. So there's a difference between what's on the books in statute that the legislature passed as far as class size and what 1351 is. 1351, especially in K3, is 17-1 regular students, 15-1 Title I schools, and the prototypical school is 17-1.
Now, have you guys looked at, if we actually hit those numbers, have you looked at how many, primarily, how many districts will have to build new schools just to accommodate that? Because you're talking about more classrooms, more teachers.
We can actually give you the specific numbers, but I can give you in a general statement, a lot. Big. Plus, we don't have the teachers to fill the spots right now either, okay? But we're also taking a look at that we know there's a lot of research coming out that wealth neighborhoods and middle class neighborhoods, students are doing very well. And their class size is maybe 22, 23-1, something like that. So we've taken a look at maybe 17-1 for Title I schools and 20-1 for non-Title I schools. Might be a better match. You don't build as many classrooms, you don't need as many teachers, but you're still lowering the class size of 23 to 20, and many teachers would be ecstatic about getting 20 kids in a classroom, first graders, kindergartners. I talked to some teachers that they may be in what people think is a fairly wealthy district, but the district has kind of bargained away their flexibility in their local levies, and they're spending a disproportionate amount on salaries. So if you spend a disproportionate amount on salaries, you have no money to keep class size low.
Right.
So you might be in a wealthy district that in first grade or kindergarten, you have 24, 25 kids in a kindergarten, but you're paying 60 days a try, and so you have large class size. So you got to put some sideboards moving forward. On none of the budgets I see is the money's going out for MSOC, materials and supplies, money's going out for class size, but is there any guarantee that it's going to be spent on that, or is it going to be bargained away for salaries?
Yeah, and want to go back, when you say Title I schools, how many Title I schools are there? What's the percentage?
We're somewhere around about a third.
Okay, would qualify
35%,
as
yeah,
Title I
35,
schools.
40%, right in there, 35, 40%.
Okay,
And it's a mixed
that's
bag.
statewide.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so some people go, well, Randy, how would you propose to move forward if you don't want to put this money out and it just be bargained? I propose statewide bargaining and regional bargaining of cost of living areas, and that there would be a differential for different areas, but without, we wouldn't call it TRI, we'd call it a cost of living adjustment.
Now,
Because that's what it's really used.
realistically, because I think there would be a lot of pushback on that.
We have that for state employees.
Well, a lot of people aren't happy about that in itself. But realistically, what are the odds of ever getting that established?
I would think that the odds, if you're going to actually try to address the court order, I think people were trying to say, we really don't have to do levy reform. We really don't have to do it. I think they're finally realizing there's been some pretty frank discussions over the last 2 weeks that guess what? We really do have to do this. And the 8 or 9 that were in that meeting, it was on TVW, Ross Hunter convened the group. And it wasn't until the last week and a half of session that we had Senator Hargrove, we had Bruce Danmeyer, and Senator Rolfes all had bills that finally talked about the real issues of McCleary. And they're tough issues. They are hard issues. We've kind of fallen behind, and now you've got to start addressing them. And everybody wanted to, we don't have to do that. If we just do these 4 buckets, we're done. And now they're finally realizing, like, well, that really isn't the case.
Right. And so you say if that you would need to do that, you believe you would have to have statewide bargaining if you
Well, when you say statewide, I actually go to kind of regional cost of living
regional.
bargaining.
But
Yeah.
in order to address the court order.
I think it'd be real tough to try to do.
Is that spelled out in the court order itself?
No.
Okay, well,
No,
let's
no.
face it, the
Okay.
legislature is not going to do that
Okay, well,
unless it is specifically
Okay,
spelled
then
out.
if you don't do that, when you pass a budget, you're going to have to specifically put that you cannot use this MSOC money for salaries. It has to go to MSOC. You got to put sideboards on it. You're going to have to do that part. And I don't see anything in the budget yet, any 3 of the budgets that does that.
What do you think is eventually going to come out of the budget? Out of the legislature.
Okay,
this year?
now we're talking about pure opinion.
Yes,
Okay, I just wanted to be
Sure.
sure that, So,
I trust it's an informed opinion, though.
okay,
probably.
yeah.
No better than I.
Well, some people would argue that
Yeah.
Randy Dorn, he's kind of a wild guy and stuff. So here's what I think may happen. Okay? That I think something along the line of what's already been proposed, $1.2, $1.3 billion. They do a COLA. They add to paying for up to 75% of all-day kindergarten gets funded. They do the $752 million of MSOC, and they do maybe 25% of K-3 staffing to the lowest level poverty school districts. When they give the COLA, that they're going to make it worse on districts more dependent on local levies. when they do that. And they're going to pass it, and they're going to try to do something, some kind of commission of legislators to work on the problem of levy reform. I don't think that meets the court order. The court order said, give us a plan,
Right.
and there's no plan there. They say we're going to study something again. I believe that something that people don't realize, the legislature now passed a law that they have to have a 4-year balanced budget.
Right.
The only problem is there's a little clause in that McCleary doesn't count on the balanced budget going forward. How are you going to pay for that? That doesn't seem to be perfect alignment. And the only thing I could say, if the legislature really wanted to show the court that, hey, we don't think we can stop the overdependence on levies, but we think we could slow it down. One thing they could do is they could pick up this difference, this 60,000 to 101. If the state said, you know what, that's been a long underfunding of education, and local districts have had to use their local levies to fund that. We're going to show you, we understand what you said, and we're going to pick up that bill. That would show the court, oh, they did get it. They did slow it down. They didn't stop it, but they understood that. They slowed it down. They could possibly do that. I believe if they just take one of those budgets going forward, the court has already ruled yesterday that they want to look, I think it's July 24th or 27th. It was announced yesterday.
27th.
27th.
It's the 27th or the earliest date 15 days after a budget is passed.
Okay, so I think they're going to take all this month to get it done. June 30th, they get it. And, you know, under the law, they're supposed to give a report to the court
Right.
immediately the next day. And the Attorney General says, we need extra time. Well, the end of session and the first session, I don't know why it would take them extra time to say they didn't do anything,
Yeah.
you know, so moving forward, I think the courts realized that they're going to have to take a long look at whatever this budget is going forward, and did it meet their court order? If it didn't meet their court order, then what do they do? That's a good question. I think if I was the court, I would declare the budget bill unconstitutional. And
What
they'd
would
have to
that
come-
do for local schools? Aren't they waiting to find out?
Well, it
their
depends on
funding
how
for
quick they
next
got
year?
back into session.
Yeah.
I won't think they would come back and do less, so you would kind of take a look at it that way. But yeah, we're on the edge of constitutional chaos, basically. So my biggest points are, one, we put out what we really believe. And, you know, people think that this is my budget. This isn't my budget. This is laid out, every piece of McCleary, what the prototypical school costs. It's in the back, the sheet, just like this. It goes through every aspect and what it costs. I didn't make up the numbers. I didn't make up what the court said you had to do. The legislature actually passed laws, 2261 and 2776, that this is exactly, it's all-day kindergarten. It's K3 class size. It's 4 through 6. That's the prototypical school model. 7 through 12 class size. CTE class size. Skills center. Lab sciences that got added. The
Now, I
prototypical.
think a lot of people don't understand that. So the court ruled on McCleary
Yep.
in 2012, and then did not the court use numbers that had been passed by the legislature? Isn't that how the court came up with
Yes.
what fully funded means?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. I just
Yeah.
wanted
No.
to clarify.
Yeah. That's 2261 and 2776. That's basically these mauve or whatever color you call that. And then the prototypical school model is the yellow. Okay? And that's what the court mentioned in the court finding, that yes, going forward, this is what is fully funding of education. And then we've added what what the studies came out is professional development days. You need about 10 professional development days. Teacher mentoring program seems to be able that we can keep more teachers and skill them up much faster if they have a mentor. And then the salary models is basically the administrators paying that differential and paying full equivalent salaries for classified. So we stretch it out to 2021 instead of 18 because I think there's no way the legislature can get to full funding by 2018. So we stretch it out. And we think that through new research, there might be an adjustment in the K-3 class size model and stretching it out. So we think that this is what it actually costs. And it comes to a number of about, and it takes your breath away when you really add up the number. It's about $9 billion. Now, I want to say I can lower it fairly quickly by $2 billion if you actually take a look at what local levies are actually buying, which is basic ed, so you could move that over to that column. So it's a big number. So when people say they can do McCleary without raising new revenue, I think that's very difficult to do. And I served 7 years on appropriations, so I know a little bit about the budget and a little bit about the appropriations. But I didn't make these numbers up. I'm just going off what's in statute. And I want people to understand that you mentioned something, that it's not a proposed initiative, 1351. That's law.
Yeah.
And it takes a 2/3 vote to adjust it or repeal it.
Right.
And so,
Realistically, though, should the legislature even deal with 1351 right now, or should they find a way to send it back to voters?
well, to me, they're supposed to do a third, and a third of 1351 this year. So they could probably call K3 doing that part right now. You could probably fudge the lines enough to say that's part of it. But I think they need to realistically say, what is in the best interest of students? What is in the best interest? And realistically, what can we get done? But if the comment is no new revenue, then that's going to be a difficult hurdle to get over. I want to remind people, the media kind of bought into this. I've seen it written in a number of papers, but we did $1 billion 2 years ago without any new revenue. That's not true. That's one of the biggest lies. I'm in Olympia and I go, how do they get away with that? And I've been telling everybody that I met with on the media, and they kind of shrug their shoulders. So 2 years ago, we did the telecom tax. 2 years ago, we did the estate tax, which is a tune of about $500 million of new revenue. Yet we write that we were able to do $1 billion for schools without any new revenue. And that's kind of picking it up. And so when you start talking about doing you start talking about doing K3, you start talking about doing MSOC, and you start talking about doing all-day kindergarten. That's over a 2-year period, and then you got to grow that, and it produces a big bow wave. If you don't have the revenue to cover that, and you're just getting barely by, I don't see how you can do the calculation unless you look at a balanced budget without putting in McCleary that is real. So, my job is to kind of just say, look, it's a difficult situation. I've been there as a legislator and stuff, but a lot of people at the end of my whole spiel and everybody listens and stuff, well, Randy, how did we get here? Well, it's really simple. And I want you to know I'm guilty. So when you're in the legislature, nobody runs on I want to go to Olympia to increase your taxes. Mm-hmm. Even the downtown Seattle liberal does not put it in their brochure. They might think it, but they don't put it in their brochure. Mm-hmm. Okay? So when you get to a point and you're a legislator and you know schools, we added technology, we added special ed costs, we added food costs, we added security costs, we have the need for smaller class size and where we have ELL kids and neighborhoods of poverty that you need smaller class size. So how are you going to pull that off? I don't want to vote for new taxes. Well, In 1978, they lowered levies to 10%. You know what we could do? We could increase the base to like 15%. That'll give districts more money to use as they see fit for themselves. And that's what we'll do. So for the last 30 years, we kept increasing the base. But it got to the point where some local districts can afford it and some can't. And so that gives an advantage to the neighborhoods that really have the extra money. And that's how we got to where we are. We got to this uneven system, and where the state should have been having revenue and the levy should have been held down small for the extras, not funding salaries, not funding class size. That's where the state, they're going to have to rebalance the ship. And it's difficult. I mean, we've been kind of treading water for at least a good 4 to 5 years. And now the good news is the legislature had a couple bills proposed that addressed most of the issues. None of them passed yet, but the legislature is now talking about it and saying, ooh, man, I didn't want to admit it, but we really are probably on the hook for all of these things. And if we wanted to have a 21st century education system, then it should be for everybody, not just certain neighborhoods. And that's right now.
Interesting time to be superintendent of public instruction, huh?
With that?
What an interesting time to be SPI.
Yeah, it's a great time to be SPI. Yeah. If you want a great job and you want to advocate for kids, and some people have pointed the finger at me as that, well, Randy, you can say that because you've never had to vote for a budget and stuff like that. Well, I was in the legislature and I voted for new revenue in '93, and yeah, I got voted out of office the next time around. But you know what? We were able to expand. We did 1209, and we didn't have much of an accountability system then in the school system. We had great anecdotes that said we're doing great. Then when we checked it out and we had a standard, about a third of our kids were meeting reading standard and about 25% of our kids were meeting math standard. And that was the bare minimum to graduate from high school. Today, we're at about 75% of our kids meeting reading standard and about 65% of our kids meeting math standard. Mm-hmm. So we've almost tripled the number of kids meet. The standard stayed the same. The only problem is the economy's changed, the global economy's changed, and now we need even more highly educated kids.
But along those lines, the studies, rankings, everything I've seen suggested Washington's public schools are among the better ones in the nation. As a state, we generally are highly regarded. Even though we don't spend as much as a lot of states per pupil.
We get a great bang for our buck.
Okay, is the solution really more spending? And aside from McCleary, I understand that is the mandate from the Supreme Court. But really, is the solution more money?
Let me put it in this perspective. Better? For a kid coming from the top third quartile of wealth, our schools do great. For that next quartile, our kids do really pretty good. From the bottom third, we don't do as well. It's our top kids that outperform a lot of kids around the nation, and our middle kids are a little higher, but our kids out of poverty, don't do as well as some of the other states that have kids. So that's where some resources need to go. Mm-hmm. Early learning programs, we lag behind. All-day kindergarten, we lag behind a lot of states that have all-day kindergarten paid for by the state. Class size in our early grades are a lot larger. So if kids come to us at grade level in kindergarten, we do a great job of keeping them there. If kids come to us a grade level behind in kindergarten with delays, we don't do as well. In fact, what we do is we maintain them about a grade level behind. We never get them caught up.
You don't do as well as other states?
Yes, we don't accelerate those kids. Right. We tend to maintain those kids. So the resources spent there would be well spent, and we would do a better job. And part of that is policy too, not always money, but it could be tied to money. So if you're a really hotshot teacher, do you get paid more money to go to a low performing school, or do you get paid more money to go to a high performing school in a district that has money? So we could change our policy that if you're in a Title I school, we're going to pay you more money. And now districts could do that on their own.
Right.
Okay. They could say, look, we're going to have, this is our salary schedule, but if you're a low performing elementary school and you're a Title I school, you get an extra $5,000. So that would generate those high level, high performing teachers an incentive to go there.
Right.
But we don't do that. So
And
in
to
that
play
part,
devil's advocate, shouldn't that be up to the local districts?
well, I guess I'll state there were certain states in the 60s that put money into certain districts and not money into other districts. And the feds said,
Sure.
we're not going to leave it up to the local districts. We're going to do something about it. Should the state superintendent bring people's attention to this and say, the districts have known this information. In fact, what we do is we see a migration in larger districts. We see teachers that have 3, 4, and 5 years experience that started out the low performing district tend to move to the higher performing schools. And so, you know, we've seen a couple around the nation that have done a little bit different with salary schedules and stuff. Tier 1, 2, and 3, and to move to a tier, if you're at a high performing school, to move to the next tier, you got to go to a lower performing school and, you know, hone your skills there too. So there's some policy things. So when you say money, you might be able to shift some things around. So,
Well, just say, and one other question to go off on
Yeah.
a tangent here. What do you personally think about the one-day walkouts by teachers?
I didn't like it. Number
Why
one,
is that?
I like you, I appreciate you calling it a walkout and not a strike, because a strike is when you lose a day's pay. The teachers did not lose a day's pay. They delayed the end of school.
Right.
So I didn't like it, number one, because I think it was unfair to parents and to kids to disrupt their schedule. They have to take time off of work. They have to find daycare and all that stuff.
To me.
So I wish they would have done it on Saturdays. I wish they would have done it after school. And then again, I don't have power over it. The locals could have done something, but you know, they're not going to do that. But what it did, some people said, well, did it have any effect? Yeah, you guys covered it. You know, the
we're
media
asking
covered it, the
about
TV
it
covered it.
weeks later.
So they got education on the front
Sure.
burner. So it did accomplish that, but I disagreed with it. I said it was going down the wrong path. You know, what I want, will McCleary make a difference to an individual student? Will it make a difference in their lives? And I absolutely believe that. And that's what I wanted us to focus on. If we fund lower class size, that helps kids. If we give them the supplies and materials they need and the technology they need in the 21st century, that helps students. Unfortunately, when the teachers walked out, I felt we were gaining ground on this is focused on kids, and that's my focus. And when the teachers walked out, it seemed like it was reported more, this is about paying me more, and this is about my workload being smaller, okay? And I'm not saying that's what the teachers were trying to get to, but that's kind of how the reporting went. I would prefer it still be student focused. And I believe many teachers, the wide majority of teachers, that's what their focus is.
Right. Well, any other questions?
No,
any
hey,
other
it's
thoughts?
very, very
Right,
interesting.
Randy, any other thoughts?
You know, I've been at this since 1987 officially. That's when I went into office. And I went to Olympia because I could see that there were haves and have-nots. I was at Eatonville School District. I visited Puyallup, at the time my hometown, and their science labs were way beyond ours. They were in 1992, they were starting to purchase a large amount of technology in their classrooms, computers, Apple IIes. And I could see we weren't, when we were just textbooks and the teacher was teaching, we kept up. But as the material rolled in, special education rolled in, all those kinds of things rolled in, you started having running start. And I was in the legislature when I advocated for that. And everybody said that was the demise of the comprehensive high school. All the bright kids were going to leave. And the only thing it did was made high schools more competitive with the college kid, more AP classes, more baccalaureate programs. All these programs came into being. We became more competitive, but I could see we at Eatonville were too small to kind of really produce that at the time, and I could see us kind of losing ground. And because people had the good sized levies, they're providing more and more for kids and more opportunities. And this is to move into the 21st century, it's about all kids having a chance at a 21st century education. And I believe that if we invest now, that you will see dramatic differences in graduation rates, because I can tell you, we have dramatically increased the graduation in the state to 80%. That's an all-time high. But I will tell you, that next 20%, to get them to graduate from high school, those kids have more challenges in their life than ever before. And I want one entity that I didn't really realize, that we're the fourth largest, we have the fourth highest population of ELL kids in the nation. And you could probably come up with the top three, but naming Washington number 4 surprises everybody. So you'd probably think California has the number 1 just because of sheer volume and where they're located. Texas, Florida, and then Washington.
And then who?
I actually don't know,
Arizona.
but
Arizona would be my
Yeah,
guess.
that was
Who?
Arizona.
yeah, but Arizona's pretty small.
It is.
Must be
That's
the
the problem.
Canadians coming in.
Yeah.
Minnesota. It's Minnesota.
So I don't know, but that's a pretty big. That's just pure population, not percentage. So
So Randy, do you have a sense of where Washington State will rank if kind of your best guess on the likely outcome here is achieved?
we would get beyond 25th. What you can't predict is what other states are going to add. And so what I've told everybody, it would get us over 25.
Okay.
And I believe
that's in spending per student.
spending per student.
And we're
yeah.
at, what did you say? We're at 42 now, or
42.
Yep.
Yeah. And you can get to 39th or 43, but 42 is Ed Week. That's the one we're going
How do
on.
we get so low?
Well, it's kind of a West Coast phenomenon too. Okay. And
Tax limitation measures.
it's tax measures. Oregon had a tax measure, and so did Prop
California.
13 in California. And we basically have, we don't have a tax measure that kind of grows with income. So we're in the top 5 as income growth, but because we don't really have any real major taxes that are tied to income growth, that I don't know if you've gotten it, and we can send it to them, but Treasurer McIntyre has a couple really good graphs that shows that percentage-wise, about 20 years ago, we were taxing our citizens at about 6.5% of their income. Now it's about 4.8 of their income. Now, I'm not saying that taxes didn't go up, but incomes have gone up a lot faster than the tax rate, so the actual percentage that people are paying is lower. And we can get you that. It's a pretty dramatic, it was a surprise to me. And that's why actually on a number of talk radios, there's been Republicans and Democrats, and they don't say they endorse it, but that's where that probably a capital gains makes some sense to people. One, it's about 2% of the population that would pay it. 2, it's on large incomes, and 41 states have it, okay? And California's is 14%, and the proposal in front of the legislature, I think it's 7% was the governor's, and I think the House is now at 5. So you're really talking about something, is that really going to be a disadvantage, or are people really going to move to, North Dakota? I don't know.
All right, well, Randy, thank you very much
Oh yeah,
for coming in.
I appreciate
Yeah,
it. And like I
appreciate it.
said, it's just me. I know.
Yeah, it's
I know
great.
I kind of go on and get a little excited about stuff, but
We appreciate you taking the time.
it's just to kind of, so when it comes down, you can look if the legislature does what's kind of on the books right now. The question's going to be, did they do anything about levies? Did they make school districts more dependent on levies? And then did they produce a plan? And then is that plan integrated into their 4-year plan of having a balanced budget?
Well, let's face it, to the individual taxpayers, the big question is going to be the levies. And,
Yeah.
And does your average citizen get any relief if they add all this money to the state? So
Hey, is there any chance somebody might go to jail if this doesn't work out?
They could
For
do
contempt.
that. There has been some cases where, like, the leaders of the 4 caucuses have been put in jail for 2 or 3 days just to
right.
send a message. There's, they could call them back into session. They could, if they don't do anything, I know New Jersey closed schools for a couple days. We have a 180-day school year. The governor tried to knock off 5 days about 5 years ago, Governor Gregoire, and we said you can't do that, and we got a little bit of a tiff on that one. But in Oregon, if you run out of money as a school district, they just knock off 10 days and call it good. But we don't have that option, I don't think. So it's, like I said, this is going to be uncharted waters. I think that they're going to get done right at the nick of time. But then does the budget meet they're under a contempt order to make it right. If you go to court and the judge puts you under contempt, you got to show how you went to treatment class, or you went to domestic violence class, whatever it is, you got to show what you did to make it right and pay your fine. So I think it's going to be tough on them.
Great. Well, thanks
All right,
very
thanks a
much.
lot.
Thank you.
bet.
Thanks for the time.